Hello, everybody out there in YouTube world. This is UXW Bill with some questions for you tonight. Have you ever wondered what the tensile strength of the walls in your house were? Have you ever wanted to levitate your pets or even scare them with the music that you were listening to? Have you ever wanted to move furniture and just not felt physically up to it? Or maybe even knock objects off the wall in other people's rooms, or maybe even down the block a ways? Have you ever wanted to annoy your neighbors or your elected officials in your city government or find out what a noise ordinance violation was like? Well, then have I got the thing for you.
And that would be this beast, the Technics Quartz Synthesizer FM-AM stereo receiver, model number SA-1010. This unit boasts a conservatively rated, according to people whose accounts I have heard, a conservatively rated 125 watts per channel into an 8 ohm load. There are people who tell me that it'll do more. There are people who tell me that it's been clocked north of 150 without undue distortion or stress on its electronics. I'm aware of only one bigger receiver that they ever marketed, the SA-1010, and it's whopping 330 some odd watts worth of output power. I don't know how many of these things exist today because in 1983 money, this thing cost about $850. As far as I know, it's the biggest receiver they produced during the 1980s. And it's got everything you'd expect. It supports 2 sets of speakers, has bass, treble, and balance controls, has a space expander stereo expansion option, a volume control, options to hook up a graphical equalizer, support for 2 tape monitors, digital tuner, and computer drive. Now, unlike my other computer drive stereo receivers, this doesn't use any hybrids. Oh no, this is discrete power transistors all the way. And if you don't think this is a serious piece of equipment, look at the size of the power transformer, the heat sinks, the transistors that you just saw, and the 2 filter capacitors right here in the middle. This is a pretty serious piece of equipment. It will do exactly what it says on the box. Now, I can't actually demonstrate that for you because, to be perfectly honest, I don't own a set of speakers that this receiver would not turn into mincemeat. And that's another thing that you can do with this. If you've got some speakers that you don't like, some little sound designs that you want to show who's boss, this thing will send them on rapidly. Anyway, this was an eBay find. I don't know how many of these there are out there, but I've seen a couple auctioned off since. And unfortunately, I'd have to say the seller was not entirely candid with me once again. They said, oh, you know, they listed it being in great shape, stored most of its life, belonged to a friend of theirs, not used very much. All of those things, unfortunately, are basically lies. This thing was rode hard and put away wet. When I unboxed it, it had been packed well. The seller did a good job. It is frightfully expensive to ship one of these things, so think about that before you buy one. I wouldn't do this again if I'd have known how much it was going to cost to get it here. Not cheap. And this thing could hurt somebody, like, say, an audio fool, if by some chance it fell onto their head. Anyway, this thing was not quite as advertised. The cover is off of it because the cover is all dinged up. The buttons show heavy signs of finger wear, and they were actually moldy. A number of lights in the front panel are burned out. This computer drive new Class A symbol is supposed to light up, as is the tuning scale over here. Neither one of them do because the lights are burned out. I have a feeling they're both grain of sand light bulbs, so probably a lot of fun to replace, but I intend to do that. A number of the preset buttons and stuff are broken. These things are actually held in place by a plastic bar along the bottom, and the plastic bar tends to break from fatigue over the years. My SA-310 has a less severe version of the same problem, and so I don't use its preset buttons hardly at all. It can also strike these other buttons over here that let you select the band and operate the tuner and things like that, so I make sure to be gentle with them. When I got this thing out of the box, I hooked up some speakers to it, and I was disgusted to discover that it didn't even play. But as I played with it, it really tried to come back to life, and I discovered that by playing with the controls, I confirmed my suspicions. It was suffering from a bad case of dirty controls. So one severe control cleaning later, it came back to life, and it sounds flawless. I did a measurement of the DC offset at the speaker terminals, both the left and right channels, with the volume control turned completely down and set to a source that's not playing or not even hooked up, such as auxiliary or tape monitor. This thing had negative 3.4 millivolts DC voltage on its speaker terminals, which is, in my book, exceptional. 0 would be perfect, but very few receivers manage to get that close. And my SA-1010 with its new amplifier module in it is going somewhere between 8 and 12 millivolts DC on the positive side. It really doesn't matter positive or negative, it's just a matter of which transistor dominates the other one. Anyway, now it plays, it's been cleaned up, and so I'll turn it on here. Now the tuner, one of the first things you can see is that the tuner has some special features. The tuner actually has a selectable filter, a wide filter and a narrow filter. In most cases, the wide filter is the one you want because it preserves the most audio fidelity. But a narrow filter will let you get clearer results from listening to a weak station or a station where there's a lot of interference. This thing's microcontroller, which manages pretty much all the front panel functions, including the volume control, and yes, it will forget its volume control settings if there aren't batteries in it. And yes, the battery compartment is a corroded mess that's so bad it actually bubbled the paint on the back of it and it needs lots of repair. But at least it works. Anyway, when the tuner is tuned to a station, the microcontroller will try to determine what is the most appropriate filter to use, and that will be indicated. Here it's using the wide filter. If the station wasn't coming in so clearly, it could switch to the narrow filter, which is indicated by that much closer indication on the vacuum fluorescent display. This doesn't tune television or anything like that. It's just AM, FM, and there is a long wave character in there, which is probably used on European models. The computer drive behaves similarly to my other receivers. It goes on preheat at startup, driving a large bias current through the amplifier to heat up the transistors quickly. Then it switches to automatic biasing. It has the signal threshold low and high lights, has a thermal light, and the trip point on this is set to 70 degrees Celsius, if you can believe it. I don't even want to know how hard you'd have it playing to get that result. There are two output indicators that don't show up on my other receiver. There's a standby indicator that I haven't seen come on other than during the self-test at startup. And then there is the output on indicator, which even when the output is off, as it is right now, no speakers are selected, it's still indicating that the output is on, probably because it's being directed into a dummy load inside the receiver or something. There's a scan indicator for the tuning. There's the tuning dial, slide rule style dial down here. This is supposed to be backlit, but the light's burned out. Quartz lock, which it's receiving a station right now from about 30 miles away. And it not only has it got quartz lock, but it's got about 2 out of the 3 signal bars. And the reception is actually not bad. If I turn the speakers on, another feature is revealed. You'll hear a number of relay clicks when I turn it on in rapid succession. That's because this unit has a built-in circuit to automatically determine the impedance of the connected loudspeakers and adjust its power supply and amplifiers accordingly, which you just heard happen right there. So we'll turn this up a little bit. Not the clearest reception, but it's doing all right for not having any antenna on it. It sounds very good now that the controls have been cleaned, even though it's not the prettiest looking receiver anymore and it needs some help. There's more burned out lighting over there. It works well. It's got a nice clean sound to it and it's plenty powerful. I've turned it up as far as I dare with these little JBL 2600 speakers, which are only rated for 100 watts worth of input power, and it's nice. So I'm looking forward to restoring this unit. But now to listen to something else. A little bit of an example with a CD here. But there's that stupid clock again, so I'll be back in a moment. I'll tell you what, at every 15-minute interval, it's hard to avoid making a video without that silly clock chiming at some point. So I better make this first demonstration quick, or we'll get to hear it interfering with things once again. Here's a CD in the Denon DCD-920 CD player that was the subject of a previous repair video. This is Mary Chapin Carpenter's Stones in the Road CD, a CD that I have had since I was about 13 or so, and I've always enjoyed listening to it. I think it's very well put together, and the piano intro on the first track really shows what a good sound this receiver has, and I'm also going to use it to demonstrate something else, and that's the space dimension function. Unfortunately, the microphone in this camera is not stereo, so you probably can't really get the full feeling of what I'm about to demonstrate here. But let's see what's going on here. Let's get this thing started up. Now here's the space dimension control. Turn that on and this thing lights up. This is full of grain of sand bulbs too. Bit of a gimmick, but I'll bet it sold a few of these. And the higher this is turned up, the more animated this display becomes. And the more pronounced the effect. Okay, that button on that CD player is a little tricky. Hopefully you were able to hear some difference there between having the effect on and having the effect off. There are definitely some minor problems. The controls all work well, although their center points are not exactly accurate. They're not aligned precisely. And also, while the uncolored, unprocessed audio sounds great, if I turn the space dimension on, the audio takes on a certain crunchiness in the high end. So there are definitely some things that still need to be taken care of with this receiver, but I like it, and it looks sharp. It's also very imposing. You wouldn't want to drop this on your toes or anything like that, I'll promise you that much.